Hey there. Today I'm going to show you how to start with stick welding and the basics of how to strike, how to run a bead, and to prevent sticking and spattering, and to give you just some information on how to begin. And first off, I'm not a professional, and everyone does everything a little bit differently, so if you disagree with something, feel free to do it your way, a little bit different if you want. But this is just the basics on how to run a rod and what to do. It's pretty simple. With a little bit of practice, you can get it just right every time. So first off, when you're starting to weld, or even when you continue to weld, you want to have yourself a pair of safety glasses so that whenever you're welding or grinding the weld or cleaning it or hitting it with a slag hammer to clean it off, nothing gets in your eye, because all it takes is just a second for a hot piece of slag, a hot piece of metal, molten metal to drip, or anything fly in your eye, and then you could possibly be blind or have very serious eye damage. So safety glasses is always a good idea. Definitely would recommend always wearing them. I always do. And then that also includes that you would wear a welding helmet. So whenever you're welding, unless you plan on going blind, you want to have a welding helmet. This one is automatic. You don't have to have something automatic, but you want to make sure that the grade for welding is always 10 or higher, because any lower than that, then the flash from welding will actually cause nerve damage in your eye, and eventually, not right away, but cause you to go blind in your eyes. So this one I have set to 10 right here, and it's completely automatic, so as soon as it detects the flash, it already darkens. Also, you want to have a pair of gloves, a pair of welding gloves. Make sure that they are leather. This is like, it's almost like a fake leather, but it is leather. It's pretty thin, but you don't need anything super thick. They have some rawhide ones that are really thick, and they work good too, but I like these because they're really easy to move your hands. Oh, wrong hand there. But see, I can make a fist pretty easily, no problem. The rawhide ones are a lot tougher to move, but they work just the same. You don't have to be doing anything fancy with the gloves, but you definitely want to make sure that you have your hands covered with a leather glove while welding, because when you're welding and you're holding the stinger, the spatter from the rod and the molten metal will get on your hands, and it will burn into your skin. And also the flash itself will also give your skin a sunburn, pretty much, and having a glove will protect your hands and prevent any damage. And also make sure you have a long sleeve, something that is pretty durable. It doesn't have to be anything heavy. This is just a long sleeve that I have, but just make sure it's not anything that's going to, if it does burn, it's not going to melt. You don't want to be wearing anything polyester or anything that's like kind of like plastic, because if it does that, then it's going to stick to your skin, and anywhere that you might have hair or anything like that, it could get tangled, and it's going to be just a really bad day. So definitely make sure you have something that is okay. If it does catch on fire, it's probably not likely that it will, but if it does, you just don't want to be in that kind of situation. Yeah, make sure you have yourself some gloves. These are Vulcan Defenders. I like them. They're good. And this is just regular old cloth shirt. And you can get yourself a welding jacket for what I'm going to be doing. It's just a simple demonstration. I don't need my welding jacket. Now for the actual welding, since we're past all the safety stuff and whatnot. This is a 6013 rod. The numbers on it indicate what kind of rod it is and all the special qualities, such as like tensile strength and whatnot. You can look up each rod's special qualities for yourself. All you have to do is type whatever number, rod, special qualities, and you'll see all that. But when welding, it's a little different for some rods, but in general with like 60-13, 70-18, 60-10, it's fairly the same. It's not going to be super different or anything like that. 70-18 is probably the most common rod, so if you want to practice and get good at it, I would practice with something like a 70-18 because that is the most common, so that is what you'll probably be using in the field if you are planning on doing that sort of thing. But whenever you start welding, I'm just holding it in my hand for demonstration, but whenever you want to start welding, you want to make sure first that you have the ground clamp connected to your work surface from your welder, and so that it completes the circuit, and I do. I have it secured on the other side of the table. And then you want to start your rod either by scratching it on the surface. So the start method, scratch. So you'd put your rod close to the table, and it'd be like a match. Just a little scratching motion. It's nothing like this. You don't pick up. It's just a little scratch like this. Just like that. And you pick up just a little bit, and then you scratch. It's going to take some practice and whatnot, but generally that's what you do. You'll have your spot that you're going to be welding. Say, I have this scrap piece of metal right here. Say I was going to start welding on this piece of metal. And I wanted to, I don't know, let's see. I want to weld on this bit right here. Then I could start down here and scratch on like the table, and then once I get it started, I can bring my rod up here and continue the rod going across the metal or wherever I want to weld. That's how you would start it. The other way to start is simply you take the rod and you tap it. You would tap it on the work surface, and you tap it. It's kind of a hard tap. It's not just a place. You don't just stick it on there, because if you do that, good chance is the rod is just going to stick to the metal and heat up. You don't want to do that. It's a tap. You tap it pretty hard against it. It's like a strike. And whenever you do that, then it makes a good connection and starts the weld. But generally, if you're having trouble, just scratch it. That usually works every time. Alright, now once you've got your weld started, you got to think about it. This is a metal rod, and it's going to burn up. So as you go further and further along on your weld, this rod is actually going to get shorter. Shorter and shorter and shorter. So once you start, it's going to get shorter as you go, and it's not just a motion, a constant motion of going whichever way you're going on your weld or following the crack or cut that you've made. You actually have to push into it as well. So it's going this way while leaning the rod in the direction you're moving. It's going this way, and it's a push into it. So I'll show on the end of my table. It's going to look like this. So, right here. So I've got my rod, and say I've started right here. It's going to be something like this, about this speed, but you're also going to be pushing the rod into the work surface slowly as it goes. And you're not wanting to like really push the rod into the metal really hard. You're just kind of keeping it about the thickness of the rod is the general rule. However thick the rod is, that's how far away you want to keep the rod from the metal. So this rod isn't super thick, so you keep it about yay close, just that far away from my finger, close to the metal. And you have to keep in mind that your rod is getting shorter, so you have to constantly go closer and closer and closer to it as you're traveling. Alright, now that we have started the weld and figured out how to start it and all the movements that we're going to be making, we're going to talk about how fast you need to go. Now, depending on the thickness and how big the rod is will change this, because bigger rods, you need to go slower in order to make a larger puddle. Now, this is just a fairly common sized rod. It's 1/8 thick, 1/8 size rod. And it's going to go not a super fast speed, but whenever you'll be able to tell if you're going too fast or too slow by the puddle that you are dragging with your rod, because when you start, it's going to liquefy the metal around the edge of the rod, and you want to have a puddle about twice as wide as the rod itself. So a little bit smaller than a dime, and you want to be able to keep that puddle as you're dragging. So if it gets any smaller, like really small, maybe just a little bit wider than the rod, you need to slow down. If it's getting maybe 3-4 times the size of the rod, you need to speed up. But whatever, depending on the weld you're doing, like if you're trying to weld a large gap, sometimes you want a larger weld, so you're going to have to do a weave. But let's not get into that right now. For just running a bead, you need to go at a decent pace, probably something like that. What helps some people is to think of a slow song or melody in their head while they're welding, and to just really focus on the size of that puddle, and to just be dragging it as you go, and to stay really consistent. Because doing all this, you know, fast, slow, fast, slow, fast, slow, that's not what you want to do. You want to stay consistent. Also, you have to keep in mind that with certain rods, you're going to need certain amps and a certain amount of power on certain pieces of metal. And for this thickness of metal, about 75 amps to close to 100 would probably be fine. But all people like a little bit different stuff. But within that range should be fine with a 1/8 to a 1/4 inch thick stuff, steel, and that should be good. I'm using a 225 Tombstone Lincoln arc welder, and alright, now I'm going to demonstrate all the stuff we've done, but I don't have a super fancy camera to be able to look at the flash of arc welding, so I'm going to go ahead and do it, and then I'll show you when I'm done. I'm just going to do it on this piece of scrap metal right here, just along here, just a little bead, and show you what a good weld looks like. And if you don't think it's a good weld, then you do you. But I'm just going to show you a decent weld and give you an idea of what it should look like. So here's the weld that I ran. I started on this end, and I just gradually pulled it this way. And I got a little bit crooked just because my safety glasses fogged up a little bit and I lost track of where I was, but not too bad. You can see the black on the weld is the slag, because the flux around the electrode creates this protective covering. So that's what that is right there. And this is also why I wanted you to make sure you had safety glasses, because you're going to use a slag hammer, and you're going to knock off the slag. There you go, one big chunk right there. Oh, I forgot my light. There we go. One big chunk coming off right there. And you can see it's a pretty good looking weld. A little bit of inconsistencies right here. I got just a hair bit faster, and it's just a little bit thinner. I like it a lot better down there and here. It's a lot wider and a lot more consistent, and you can actually see the puddle lines as it was forming. And right here it's just a tad bit skinnier than I would like. All in all, there you go. I started on this end, and I just struck across the table and brought it up here, and I made sure that I could bring it right here. This whole weld probably took me about, from going here to here, it's probably about 30 seconds, give or take 5 seconds or so. And I just took a slow path running that bead right there. It's not a super flat bead either, and it would have been a lot flatter if I would have ran it a lot higher, but I'm pleased with it. And if you use all that, all the stuff I told you, and you just give it some practice and put some time into it, you can run a bead just fine and you can weld. Well, thank you for watching. I really appreciate you sticking through it. And if anything was helpful, feel free to subscribe or like or comment or whatever. And if you didn't like it, then tell me why.